Hello there everyone, welcome to the channel if you're new, welcome back if you aren't, I'm EDJ, and we have finally reached the final episode of Basil II by HistoryMarche. So this is part 7, and we're going to be looking at the legacy of the last Roman emperor, the final battle of Basil II. And yeah, this is going to be very interesting to watch. Last video, Basil basically finally defeated Bulgaria. He, defeated them through battle, and then basically through great, diplomacy and administration, absorbed them into, Rome again, basically making the West, expanding the West back. What they lost so much, as we covered in the first part of this series. And now Basil has completely restored it. So that's amazing, the way he handled that. Like, he's a very great emperor, and I'm looking forward to seeing any last minute brilliance he has to show, because that would have been fine if it ended, but it seems like he has still more to do. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what more he can accomplish now. So yeah, I'm just really excited. I just want to get right into this. If you want to watch the original video, the link is down below. Without any further ado, let us watch the legacy of the last Roman emperor, the final battle of Basil II.
By the close of the first decade of the 11th century, Emperor Basil II has held the ultimate power in Constantinople for 3 decades.
Look at that. Beautiful. Also, wait. Yeah, it is so weird to see, like, we see, this is like at the medieval era, and we're already seeing the nations that are still around, like France and England. It's so weird. Hungary, it's all there, and Rome is still coexisting with them. It puts into perspective, yeah, Rome was around for a really long time, weren't they? Like, they were around for a very long time.
The ultimate power.
And just look at that. The West, so much of it was lost in the first part of the series, and Basil just took it all back. That's amazing. That's just great. That's just a great accomplishment on its own.
Constantinople for 3 decades. In that time, he pushed the Roman Empire's borders back to their ancient line on the Danube River, entering places where the Roman standards have not been seen in centuries. Simultaneously, he has campaigned in the south and east against the Islamic caliphates, winning great success and keeping the empire's 1,000-year presence in Syria alive. The realm was at its greatest size in almost 400 years, and its treasury full due to prudent economic policies.
Yeah, I've heard Basil's just a really great emperor, and he really shines at administration, It's not just conquest and battling. We're seeing a lot to him, his mind, the way the Romans are operating at this time, not just through, okay, we're just gonna beat everyone up, there's a lot of skillful maneuvering, great wealth, great expansion, higher than it's been for centuries. Yeah, overall, just a very great emperor.
Basil was now in his 50s. No other emperor was revered as highly as him since the time of Justinian. But no Caesar is ever without his challengers, however, and 2 youthful upstarts at opposite ends of the empire are stalking the old lion, looking for signs of weakness. Could the Lombard Melos of Apulia and the newly crowned King George I from the Caucasus Mountains overthrow the longest reigning Roman emperor in history, a man so noted for his prowess in battle that he became known as the Bulgar Slayer? But before we continue, I want to welcome back a returning... In Italy, the southern lands are still firmly in imperial hands, along with the western coastal areas around Gaeta, Napoli, and Amalfi. But in 1009, nearly all Lombard principalities of the Mezzogiorno rally behind Melos of Apulia and his brother Datus in an attempt to establish Lombard independence and expel the Roman imperial apparatus. Melos seems to genuinely believe in a kind of Lombard nationalism, though it goes without saying that any Lombard kingdom will have him as its monarch. While the Calabrian region has been Greek in culture for millennia, Apulia is stalwartly Lombard, a people who have yet to fully assimilate into Italian culture. In addition to heavy Roman taxation and military service, Apulia is also in prime position to endure the worst of North African pirate raids, growing in intensity since the fall of Sicily in the 9th century. Every year, thousands of Apulians are loaded onto slave boats bound for North Africa, and the Romans seem to have no ability to stop these attacks other than encouraging local militias. These local forces, who have their own naval component, are primed for Melos's message of independence. This rise of Lombard hostilities would eventually escalate into a direct clash between the two most powerful states in Europe, the Holy Roman Empire and the Eastern Roman Empire. Simultaneously,
I just love seeing the Holy Roman Empire. Like, they're not Roman. Meanwhile, actual Rome is here. It is funny when I was looking up. I was kind of like interested in, hey, how did the rest of like Europe like deal with the Eastern Roman Empire? Like, how did they view them? Like, I was kind of like trying to look it up. And, a lot of them kind of came to idolize Rome, like, because I think especially during, like, later on, a lot of them wanted to emulate Rome. And it's like, Rome is still around, though. It's like, which is the funniest thing. But they seem to want to ignore that. and what else? Also, we hear, like, I think they would often refer to them as, like, the kingdom of the Greeks or something. Like, there was, like, an excerpt where they would just, where other, like, kings and whatnot would just refer to the Eastern Roman Empire as, like, the kingdom of the Greeks. They, as we know in one of the Crusades, they eventually just sacked them. And it's like, yeah, it's just funny that, so many are trying to emulate Rome in a time where Rome is still around, but they seem to want to, like... Yeah, they seem to, like, have this weird reverence towards Rome, but, almost this weird relationship with the Eastern Roman Empire. Like, it's a bit weird. I'm not putting it correctly into words, but... It is interesting to just see, that.
The East, another conflict was about to be ignited as the newly established kingdom of Georgia was growing ever more militant. To recover territories lost to the Roman Empire in the last decade of the 10th century, George I works to establish an alliance with Fatimid Egypt. We do not inherit the land from our ancestors, we borrow it from our descendants. No less energetic than his younger self, the old Emperor Basil prepares to meet the new challenges head-on and secure his hard-won conquests for his successors. Melos's bid for Lombard independence starts in Bari and then spreads to Ascoli and Trani. The Roman governor of the region, or Catapan, John Curcus, is killed by the rebels, but his successor, Basil Mesordanites, marshals the resources of the province and, along with some effective bribes, takes back Bari. Melos's first rebellion implodes instantly. He escapes to take refuge in Salerno with its ruler, Guimard III, but his wife and children are taken hostage and sent to captivity in Constantinople. After several years of gathering supporters throughout the principalities of southern Italy, Melus begins to grow bold enough to attack Imperial Italy again. In 1016, a group of 250 Norman pilgrims passes through the Italian town of Gargano on their way to the shrine at Mont Sant'Angelo. The man in charge of this band is Rainulf Drengo, a Norman baron who has been exiled from northern France after murdering a relative of Richard II of Normandy, the grandfather of William the Conqueror.
Wow.
On their way to the shrine...
Yeah, it is so wild to see Rome just coexist with medieval Europe, because, you know, sometimes, like, it's, like I said, sometimes it seems like the Eastern Roman Empire was ignored by that. Like, oh, only we can go back to the glory of Rome. Meanwhile, Rome is, like, still around, but they want to ignore that. But, yeah, it's just wild to see just how... Yeah, they were around for a freaking long time, dude. It's insane. And... yeah.
Normans are intercepted by Melus, who initially amuses the rough northerners with his manner and what they think is his effeminate style of dress. Nevertheless, Melus makes a convincing case when he explains his aim of liberating the entire Lombard region, and the Normans are certainly tempted by the riches of the warm and bountiful countryside. Melus recruits Drango's men. They promise to assist Melus once they have had a chance to return north and gather some more of their countrymen. The next year, 1017, the crew of Norman mercenaries and their new employer link with the rest of Melus's army at Capua. Not long after, Melus and his men invade Imperial Apulia from the north. By the end of 1017, the joint Norman-Lombard forces occupied much of northern Apulia. Worried about the situation in Italy, Basil dispatches reinforcements of Roman regulars, Bulgarians, and his own northern warriors, who have arrived courtesy of Vladimir I of Kiev, to whom Basil gifted the hand of his sister Anna in marriage. This ferocious contingent is coming to make a name for themselves in the palaces of Constantinople and a wider realm of the empire, the Varangian Guard.
Yes, the Varangian Guard. Basically the Praetorians, but they were actually good at their job. Instead of killing emperors, they defend emperors. Yeah, the Varangians I have heard about. I have done some research, not too much, but you know, some. Basically, yeah, the Praetorian Guards, if they actually worked as they were supposed to work, awesome in battle, some of the great in battle, great in loyalty, and in doing anything to defend their emperor. Overall, at last, man, it brings me back to when we were covering the Dova Hadi Unbiased History of Rome series. Oh man, that feels like such a long time ago now. But, yeah, when we were covering that, and then just the frickin' Praetorians were killing everyone, I'm like, oh my goodness, it took, just so many emperors died by the Praetorians, it's insane. But luckily, you know, it's like the Virgin versus Chad meme, wait. Yeah, it's like the Virgin Praetorian Guard versus the Chad Varangian Guard. I'm not gonna go through too much of this, it'll make this video too long, but I remember I saw this, and it just made me laugh. Yeah, overall, finally, the great Varangians have arrived, and yeah, they were, I guess, yeah, the alliance between Basil and the Rus kind of helped give way to them, I believe. So, yeah, another lasting legacy from Basil II that we all know of, and a very good lasting legacy at that.
The new commander of Roman Calabria and Apulia, Basil Boioannes, proves extremely effective. Boioannes meets Melus close to the Ofanto River, not too far away from Cannae, where 1200 years before, the Romans suffered one of their most infamous defeats against Hannibal.
Yes. Oh man, good old Hannibal. It's still insane that the Romans recovered from Cannae. That's so insane to me. Man, the Romans, man, they do not go down easily.
Just as in that ancient battle, the Romans of Basil's time vastly outnumber their enemy. It is said that they swarmed like bees from a hive over the battlefield, and to the daunted Normans and Lombards, it appeared that when their long lances were held upright, they looked like a field of cane. The heavily armored cataphracts run roughshod over the rebels, who it said fought bravely, but only to put off the inevitable. By the end of the day, Melus's host was overrun and driven off the field. After annihilating Melus's army, Basil's Varangians convinced the surviving number of their Norman cousins to enter Roman service. This decision to recruit the Normans in Italy rather than vanquish them would eventually enable the Normans to push both of their former employers, the Romans and Lombards, out of power in Italy.
Man, the Normans. Oh, there's a lot to cover with them. So yeah, that came back to bite them, huh?
In the early 11th century, however, they proved to be an excellent addition to the imperial garrison in Italy. Soon after his defeat, Melus's cause once more collapses, forcing him to seek refuge within the court of the Holy Roman Emperor, Henry II. Boioanus, meanwhile, sets out to secure the frontiers of his province. By 1019, he adds some Lombard territory to his catapanate, and work begins on a chain of fortifications along the full width of the peninsula, with the aim of protecting the imperial domains from any northern incursions. The decisive victory at Cannae caused both the principalities of Capua, Benevento, and Salerno to shift their loyalties towards Constantinople, turning their back on their formal suzerain, Henry II, the Holy Roman Emperor.
Yeah, that seems like it's gonna cause a conflict. As he mentioned earlier, there's a conflict between, the wannabe Holy Roman Empire between the actual Roman Empire. An empire that is neither holy nor Roman, or an empire, but whatever, point is. But look at that. Look at how much is now under Roman influence again. That's amazing.
Boioanus also captures Melus's brother Datus and has him executed in the old Roman style. Datus is shoved into a sack along with a monkey, a snake, and a rooster, and then thrown into a river.
That's interesting. But poor animals, man. Why do the animals have to die? I'm sorry, I like animals. I never love hearing them get killed.
Given that Boioanus serves an emperor that once had more than 10,000 prisoners of war blinded and pitifully marched back home to their kinsmen in Bulgaria, this stern medicine is not surprising. It seems to have enraged the Pope, and of course Melus, and they both prevail upon their patron Henry for retributive justice. The simultaneous loss of Capua, Benevento, and Salerno, and with them the vital pass of Monte Cassino, has opened the road to Rome for Basil's forces. For the first time in many years, perhaps even centuries, the emperor in Constantinople appears to have a chance at conquering the entire peninsula up to the Alps. Henry, with so much of his symbolic power and legitimacy resting on control of Rome, cannot allow this. In 1021...
This is such an interesting conflict. It's like the Holy Roman Empire, which is, as you've heard countless times, neither holy nor Roman nor an empire, still has that legitimacy, and they have the city of Rome where it all began, and they're fighting against the actual Roman Empire, who has survived even without their place of origin, the city of Rome. There's so much. There's a lot going on here, I'm noticing, but it is beyond interesting.
Henry launches an invasion in Italy. Having one of the mightiest armies in Europe on their doorstep no doubt unnerves both Basils, yet Boioannes has done his best to prepare for this invasion. Henry's force is split into 3 columns. The first is under the command of Pilgrim, Archbishop of Cologne, and travels down the western seaboard to bring the recalcitrant Lombard duchies there back under the western banner. Passing through Capua, and then taking hostages after a month-long siege of Salerno, Pilgrim leaves to join Henry, who travels down the eastern coast, and Poppo, Archbishop of Aquileia, who has traveled down the central Apennines before they meet with the Pope at Benevento. The 3 columns converge at Troia and place the fortress under siege in the early days of April 1022. The huge army fails to make a dent in Boioannes' defenses or to upset his Norman garrison. The possession of Troia is necessary for Henry to proceed south, but its defenses in the mountains are too great a challenge, and there is no success in persuading any of the defenders into treachery, as Pilgrim had done at Capua. The weeks turn into months, and the inevitable heat of a South Italian summer begins to wear on the North European troops. By June, dysentery and malaria spread, slowly melting Henry's ranks. In addition, the Holy Roman Emperor suffers discomfort due to a gallstone. Seeing no other option, Henry decides to return to Germany, effectively abandoning his campaign.
What?
Boioannes has stopped the biggest army of Western Europe.
I'm so sorry. Why is that so funny to me? I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. It's just this dude is like, oh no, my territory. I'm under threat. I need to go and show Rome who's the superior Rome, I guess. He shows up, basically doesn't do anything. Gets his butt kicked by natural causes. Basil didn't even have to give him a pitched battle. His defenses were enough. And he just leaves. Oh my gosh, that's a complete disaster. He got owned so hard. Wow, talk about a failure, man.
Europe without even leaving his base at Bari.
Yo, these guys suck. Oh, man. Yeah, go away, you Rome wannabe. The actual Rome doesn't even... The actual Rome didn't even give him attention. That's insane to me. That goes to show you, right? You know, their Rome on Wish. The Rome you buy on, like, on eBay. This is the actual Rome. Oh my gosh, that made me laugh. What the heck?
Much like his Roman ancestor Fabius with Hannibal over 1,000 years previously, the Catapan had defeated the invaders by avoiding an open battle with them. Furthermore, Basil II's ability to recognize and appoint talented commanders had saved the day. But while Henry II's invasion of Italy unfolded, Basil II's own campaigning is directed elsewhere. By the late 1010s, tensions on the eastern fringes of the Roman Empire are reaching a boiling point. The newly established Georgian kingdom and its young and rash king, George I, has ignited the conflict. Back in 1014, the newly crowned monarch of Georgia had occupied Roman territory and secured many alliances with the local Armenian, Georgian, and Kurdish principalities. However, his most significant diplomatic success was his pact with the unstable Fatimid Caliph al-Hakim, who in 1009 had ordered the burning of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Perhaps unsurprisingly, this alliance fell apart following the mysterious disappearance of the Mad Caliph in 1021. This curious event presents a perfect opportunity for Basil II. Around the same year, the 63-year-old emperor musters an army of close to 30,000 and sets out for the east. Aiming to surprise his enemies, Basil keeps his ultimate destination a secret. His officers are expecting to...
Oh boy. So yeah, Basil's, as we've covered through these many episodes, Basil's entire strategy every time he goes for his go-to, if you would, is that he moves quick. Usually he moves quick, undetected, and usually suddenly, attacks his enemies, catching them unawares. Very Napoleon-esque. So yeah, speed, outmaneuvering, and surprising his enemies is Basil's in specialty. It's the move he always goes for, and it seems like he's gonna do it once again.
Campaign against the Fatimids, but instead the emperor encamps near the city of Theodosiopolis, the capital of the newly established Iberian theme. From there, Basil requests all his Caucasian allies, including the young George, to visit and pay respects to him. When, quite expectedly, the Georgian king fails to respect the summons, Basil destroys nearby Georgian towns and begins to mobilize his force for an invasion of the kingdom. In return, George invades Roman territory and burns the town of Oltisi, which Basil had likely planned to use as a stopping point for resupply. Following that, the young king immediately heads back northwards. Closely following every movement of his opponent, Basil moves in his direction. The Roman and Georgian armies are divided by a considerable distance. Yet once again, the mobility of Basil's army would be the determining factor in the outcome of the conflict. As George marches his men through a swampy area named Shrymny just to the west of Lake Palakazio, now known as Lake Childir, the southernmost section of his army is attacked by the vanguard of the Roman cavalry. The king quickly comes to the realization that Basil has somehow overtaken him. Wasting no time, George hastens the main body of his men, leaving the engaged portion of the army to fend for itself. Luckily for him, the commander of the southern Georgian contingents, Liparitis, proves to be sturdy. The attack of the Roman vanguard is repulsed. Yet soon, the Caucasian contingent is forced to face an attack from the recently arrived Roman main force. Incredibly, this assault is repulsed again. Eventually, the strength of Liparitis and his men begins to leave them. Stuck in the mud and with the bulk of the Georgian army having already escaped to safety,
the double envelopment,
the small contingent faces one final Roman assault.
Dang. Liparitis really handled himself well. I actually thought he was going to go down much easier. He handled it really well there.
Proves to be the finishing blow for Liparitis and his men. Despite winning the engagement, Basil has failed to achieve his goal of intercepting the entirety of the Georgian army. Liparitis' heroic stance enables George and his men to escape to the mountains, where they are joined by allies from the Caucasus. Angered by this fact, Basil wreaks havoc in mainland Georgia for the entirety of the remaining autumn, plundering settlements from 12 different Georgian provinces. At the end of 1021, the emperor withdraws to winter quarters in the Black Sea port city of Trebizond. While staying there, the Basilius opens negotiations with George, which would continue in an atmosphere of distrust throughout the year. In the meantime, Basil secures a massive addition to his empire in December. Unable to defend his lands from Kurdish and Turkic raids, the Armenian king of Vaspurakin, Sennacherib, surrenders his kingdom to Basil in return for an estate deeper into Anatolia.
Dang, dude, Basil is growing Rome so effectively, and he's doing it sometimes without even having to just, like, fight. Just through good old diplomacy and negotiation. That's amazing.
By this point, the old emperor has made it a tradition of his to acquire vast territories in the east without sacrificing a single Roman soldier.
And that's amazing. You know, often we do glorify the guys who go in there and just take everything, conquest, but I love how Basil has been able to achieve such great things without having to sacrifice so much life, you know? Like, I do admire that very greatly about him.
This positive development is tempered by an unexpected revolt in Anatolia, which catches the emperor unprepared while he is still in Trabzon. Nikephoros Xiphias, the hero from Clydion who played a crucial role in Basil's Bulgarian conquest, is now preparing to stab his monarch in the back.
Oh, Xiphias. Man, he's been through so much with Basil. Now suddenly he's a turncloak now.
The 64-year-old Basil has not sired any heirs, having spent his entire reign on the frontier without marrying. As such, the throne seems...
Yo, that's really bad. I mean, that's like one of the most important things you can do as a monarch. You need to have an heir. It's a very underrated aspect, but like but super important when you think about it, because not having a legitimate heir will create so much issues. And yeah, we've seen the succession crises of Rome. That's bad. Like, you can be a great ruler, but if you don't leave, like, the door open for the next generation, if you don't, like, you know, groom someone to be a great successor, everything you accomplish could be undone, like, just like that in the next generation. That's bad. I get it, he's busy, but, like, that's, like, a really important thing to ignore. And, like, he's 60, he's already old, you know, like, oh, that's not good, Basil. That's really not good, dude. You need to have the next generation ready. You could be great, but if you die, and then the next generation doesn't have someone else, everything falls apart then. That might be Basil's greatest mistake there.
Ripe for the picking. And thus, Xiphias, a former friend and a trusted general of Basil, revolts against his suzerain. Shortly after his exploits at Clydion, Xiphias had been put in control of the province of Anatolikon, a region that is essentially in the backyard of Basil's current theatre of war. The general-turned-rebel teams up with a certain magnate named Nikephoros Phokas, the son of Bardas Phokas, but unfortunately...
The amount of focuses... If I had a nickel for every time a focus fought Basil, I would be rich.
For the two men, the revolt would only gather supporters in Cappadocia. While the Phokas name carries significant weight in Anatolia, Xiphias was a stranger to the local elites. His past exploits in the west did not do much to increase his popularity in the east. Unsurprisingly, the relationship between Xiphias and Phokas quickly becomes strained. Allowing jealousy to get the best of him, the governor of Anatolikon kills Phokas in August. Following this, the revolt collapses. Eventually, Xiphias's bid for the throne ends in his arrest.
Dude, Basil, you are lucky. You are so lucky, man. Wow. I'm sorry. I'm still thinking about what happened back in Italy, just the complete disaster there, and now here. Man, Basil's lucky that his enemies are incompetent, at least in that regard. Because man, talk about luck.
The general is spared and forced to become a monk by Basil, who likely still holds respect for his former friend. In the meantime, King George has begun to show willingness to negotiate for peace. This proves to be a bluff, though, as George is evidently looking for an opening to attack. Around September, the Georgians invade the region of Fajian. Basil answers by moving his army from the fort of Mazdat, where his men have been stationed throughout most of 1022. As the Emperor is moving close, he expects George to shy away from an open battle. Yet instead of pursuit, the Emperor gets ambushed, a military tactic to which he had grown accustomed in the long decades of his reign. In the mid-autumn, the Imperial army has encamped close to a town named Svindax. Otherwise thorough in his reconnaissance, Basil, who was perhaps confident that the Caucasian army would not dare a confrontation, fails to properly scout the area. As such, the
Another blunder there, Basil. Man, how's this gonna go?
Emperor does not spot the incoming Georgian army, which immediately launches an assault upon its arrival. As the Roman army files out of its encampment, George orders his cavalry to attack. The Georgian horse follows up the infantry advance and clashes with the surprised Romans. Although their attack is frantic and disorganized, the Georgians inflict serious damage to the Romans. The engaged imperial units are soon turned to flight. Quick to believe the battle had been won, the Georgian cavalry leaves the battlefield to plunder the Roman camp, exposing George and his infantry.
Oh, are they gonna turn back?
Further away, Basil successfully regroups his fleeing men.
Oh, snap. I was like, oh man, Basil, you've been defeated. But man, is he about to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat? Like, that goes to show you the importance of discipline, right? Man. George had a really good... I mean, this battle isn't done yet, we'll see if it goes. But George had a really good showing right there. Basil made a really big error. You know, it seems ambushes are really effective against Basil. But, yeah, fortunately they weren't successful in completely destroying Basil's force like Samuel was all those years ago. So George had a really good showing, thanks to Basil's blunder with the reconnaissance. Basically had a golden opportunity to catch him. George took it, but now it seems like his failure to fully destroy and keep, you know, pursuing, it seems like it's about to be his undoing. I guess we'll find out, though.
As Varangians leading the way, the Emperor clashes against the Georgian foot. The fight isn't even a contest, as the Romans quickly began mauling George's exposed infantry. The raiding Georgian cavalry soon attempts to aid their king, but to no avail. Their horses are rendered useless from the heavy booty they insist on carrying with them. With his army beginning to suffer severe losses, George orders a retreat. Eventually, after suffering more casualties along the way, the king and his surviving men manage to make it to the safety of the nearby Tzionis castle. Basil has accomplished his goal, and the Georgian king has been decisively defeated in a single encounter.
Dang, George, you had a good showing for a second, but you completely fumbled the ball, and Basil rebound like amazingly from that.
Seeing the writing on the wall, George decides to relent and accept Basil's peace terms. The territory he had occupied back in 1014 is returned to Constantinople. To make sure George would be true to his word, the emperor takes his young son Bagration as an honorary hostage. Basil has once again successfully secured the east. By 1023, the Basilius is back in Constantinople. Ignoring the fact that he is approaching 70, the emperor turns his eyes to the west, preparing to retake Sicily for his empire. Yet this final invasion was not to be. Basil II passed away on the 15th of December 1025, after residing on the Roman throne for nearly 50 years.
Man. Wow, just like that.
He was buried at the Church of the Holy Apostles, taking his deserved place of rest, next to the other giant figures of Roman histories, such as Constantine and Justinian.
Yeah, very worthy to be among them. Like, man, we saw how Rome was losing so much territory at the first part of this, series, and just how Basil completely reversed that, expanding Rome to heights it hadn't seen in centuries. And he was about to go even further, but, he died, obviously. The dude was 70. Really should have had a son. I think that's the biggest mistake, blunder on his part. As we know with issues of succession, like I said, I just think when you're a ruler, a very underrated but important aspect is having a good successor, because you can have the greatest reign ever, but if you don't have a good successor, the next generation can completely undo everything you accomplish. So I think that's probably, if I had to criticize Basil on one thing, it's that he needed a successor, a really good one, and needed to sire an heir. I know he was busy, but that's still, I think, a very important thing. Underrated, sure, not as glorious as conquest and battle, but no less important, in my opinion. If we learned anything about how not having a good successor causes everything to fall apart for the Romans, that's probably the only part I would have to criticize Basil on. But I have more to praise him for. His ability to, in battle, in administration, in diplomacy, in management, everything else, other than having a good heir, 5 stars. 10 out of 10. Basil is truly worthy to be among the greats, and his feats are amazing. He had it all, man. He had talent, he had great military, diplomacy, negotiation. He had great skills in everything, and an all-around, just everything an emperor should have, Basil had, So, and also, the most underrated ability that all the great men in history have, from Constantine, Napoleon, Alexander, Julius Caesar, luck. It's a very underrated ability, but yeah, how many of his enemies destroyed themselves without Basil having to do much? Like, we saw in Italy, and then here, the revolt is just, yeah, some good old luck goes a long way, and Basil certainly had luck on his side. So, when we've covered so many of these people, a lot of them die very unhappily, like Napoleon, Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar. A lot of these great men don't have happy endings, as we've covered. Oh, especially Purest of Emperors. That was insane. But yeah, these men don't have happy endings. You know, most of them don't. But it seems like Basil had a really great ending. Sure, he wanted to keep going to Sicily, and you know he didn't accomplish more of what he wanted. But for what he did, you know, he lived to an old age. He defeated all his enemies. He expanded Rome. He won, essentially. You know, he won, and yeah, I think this was a very overall triumphal ending, you know, for a great emperor, which is nice to see. He didn't have like a tragic end, or then again, I don't know that succession thing. I don't know everything that happens after Basil, but that succession thing really worries me.
Basil's story was a unique one. Unlike other great conquerors of history, the Bulgar Slayer wasn't born with any natural talent for warfare. He did not have a military upbringing or an imposing outside appearance.
Yeah, he started off like losing, but you know, it's amazing. He started off in a really bad position, but he got better with time. Basil, he learned a lot and he got better, and that's nice. He didn't start off the most gifted man in the world, you know, but he got better and he improved, which is amazing, you know. It's just cool.
What Basil managed to achieve was the result of sheer determination and an unrivaled devotion to his imperial occupation. Inheriting the Roman Empire as a sickly boy, dominated by advisors and power-hungry nobles, and leaving it as one of the greatest rulers known to Eastern Roman history. If you enjoyed watching, attack the like button and subscribe.
So yes, I finally understand the hype of Basil II. This was a fun adventure. I really enjoyed this. I really enjoyed this series, and I have, you know, it's cool to learn about the Byzantines, mainly because I don't. I never really researched much into the, you know, the Eastern Roman Empire. You know, I only knew Justinian. That's kind of it. So it's nice learning about these guys. And yeah, Basil's just, you know, I dub him Chadzel the Second. Very great man. Like I said, I just know that after him, the Byzantines do shrink again. Like I said, I don't know how much. Like I said, that succession thing worries me that he didn't handle that. But then again, I don't know everything after him, so I don't know. I'll be doing research on that on my own now. But for the most part, this was a wonderful series. This was a fun adventure. And rest in peace, Basil II, man. Great emperor overall. And yeah, guys, I guess I'll be seeing you all in the next one. Bye, everyone.